All right, so today what I want to do is talk about rules of thumb when it comes to budgeting. We talk a lot about the behavior side of money, the emotional side of money, and what I don't typically do on my podcast is talk about like the technicals. But I do think it's important to, especially from a high level, to understand the rules of thumb when it comes to money. And if you can stay within these rules of thumb, you're going to do really, really well. Even if you're not perfect, these are things to strive for. And remember, these rules of thumb are rules of thumb. They are not like concrete etched in stone. You know what I mean? So be very careful saying that, oh, I'm not within here, therefore there's no way I can build wealth. I don't want this to like take you away from building wealth. I want this to let you have a guiding point to get to the wealth. So the first one I want to talk about is mortgage payment. So this includes your principal, your interest, your taxes, and your insurance. Remember, all of those things combined typically roll up into what you know as a monthly mortgage payment. That should be no more than 25% of your monthly take-home pay. So if you're making, let's call it $6,000 a month take-home pay, it actually hits your bank. That means $1,500 a month should be going to your mortgage payment and no more than that. Now, there are certain exceptions. If you are a young professional where you expect a pretty significant increase in income, I am okay going up to 30% and even in some weird cases like 35%. But here's why I'm very skeptical even saying that out loud is because people will justify away with that. And anything that I say is like the rule of thumb, they'll pretty much typically stretch that. So I'm not advocating for like 40% here or anything crazy like that, or for the person that's already deep into their career to take on more than 25%. I'll give you an example. When I was at Deloitte, when I first started, I was making $50,000 a year. So I knew as a CPA at Deloitte, like I was paid on the lower end, and that was the whole purpose of starting at Deloitte. It was a resume builder, and that my salary would substantially increase within 6 years at 2x to 100,000. But even if I were to then go into the private sector versus public where I was at, then it would have, been a pretty significant increase very quickly. And so when we first started, we first bought a house, it was on the $50,000 income. Now we did keep it within 25% of our take home pay. So the 2x in income was just additional and it was actually going to our investments and debt pay down and stuff like that. But it is something to think about when you're looking for a home because this is a 30-year purchase typically. In some cases, people are pushing to 40 years, and I don't want you to be pigeonholed into a fixed payment that's a significant portion of your take-home pay where you have no flexibility for the long haul. Just not worth it, and it's going to be a curse rather than a blessing that it should be. Number two, it kind of goes hand in hand. So honestly, bullet point number one's more important. Bullet point number two is to give you a range of what to look at when you're trying to get number one to be right, 25%, is the home price should be no more than 3 to 5x your annual gross income. So if you guys make 100,000, let's say wife makes 100,000, husband makes 125, your joint income is $225,000 of income. Taking that times 3 or times 5 is the house price you should be looking at. That's your range. Now, that doesn't include down payment. That doesn't include other factors, obviously, in your situation. But that's a good rule of thumb to stay within when you're looking for houses. So when to refinance? If the interest rate drops by 1% or more. So when I'm filming this, rates are right now in the 6% range. They've been upward of 7%, even close to 8%, depending on your credit. And I do not think rates are going to drastically drop. But if they do start to drop or you do see a pullback and it's 1% or more of what you've locked in, it's worth it to refinance typically from a math equation. It's not guaranteed that it always makes sense, but a lot of times it does. If you have to refi and it puts you in a worser position, then obviously we're not trying to do that here. That's not the point. But if it does put you in a better math position, it would be worth it. Number four, how much to pay for home maintenance? What I always advise new homeowners to do is to always expect more than you expect because if you've owned a house, you know what I'm talking about. But set aside 1% of the home's value every single year for maintenance type of stuff. I can tell you from our experience, it's been drastic to where 1% hasn't covered it. In fact, we lost our last home due to a pretty severe mold and mycotoxin issue. And when we moved into this house, the upgrades we made on this house was about $35,000 in total. So the 1% rule is a rule of thumb, but I can speak from experience. It was much more than 1%. How much to pay for rent? The same thing goes for rent as goes for a mortgage payment, 25% or less of your take home pay. Now, the thing with rent is that you're not building equity. I don't bash rent. I think depending on the situation, it could make a lot of sense short term. I do think you should look to own long term, but I know lifestyles are different, and some people like to live the nomadic lifestyle and not tied down, and I understand that. And so even if you are renting, keep that below 25% of your take home pay, especially if you're nomadic and you want to go experience real life. Don't lock yourself into a huge rent payment. When it comes to debt, the biggest question I get is pay it off or invest. So if you're thinking between paying it off or investing, paying off that debt, that is, there are a few things to take into consideration. Obviously, if you have a high interest rate debt, take all of your money and pay it towards that. It makes mathematical sense, obviously. But if you're in the point of 6% or below interest rate debts and you're thinking, should I pay it off? Should I invest? I typically run a simulation, and I have that in the top right-hand corner of this video for you to go run your own simulation and see which one makes most sense for you. But oftentimes both could make sense. I'm a big believer in doing one thing at a time. I'm just very proactive about things and very go-getter. So when I do one thing at a time, I don't lackadaisically do those things. I do it really quickly. When we paid off $76,000 of debt in 1 year, it was literally within 1 year. So like it wasn't taking away from our long-term investments. And I think we're doing okay. So I always say do whatever lets you sleep at night, but I do think that you should run simulations to see which one makes most sense. In the simulation that you'll do, it's extreme 1, extreme 2, and then usually kind of a combination approach. Number 7 is how much total debt should you have? Ideally 0, but total debt should be 36% or less of your monthly gross income. So a DTI, debt to income ratio, no more than 36%. I highly recommend less. I highly recommend to get to 0. I'm at 0 and it's well worth it. But if you are in debt, keep it within reason and eventually have a plan to get out of debt. Do not stay in debt your whole life. That's silly. That's a dumb lifestyle. Number 8, student loans. Starting salary should be greater than the total debt that you take on. So if I started Deloitte at $50,000, I should come out of school with less than $50,000 of debt, which I did. I came out with about $40,000 of debt. So I was coming out about 80% of my starting salary. That is what you should aim for. Do everything in your power to get scholarship, everything in your power to work, everything in your power to pay it off during school as much as you possibly can. You don't want a huge student loan on the back end of your college career to haunt you for years to come with your career just starting. Not worth it. When it comes to cars, use cash or do the 24-10 rule. So not 24, but 24-10 rule. This is a 4-year loan or less, so no more than 48 months on the financing, 20% down payment on that car, and 10% of monthly income at max going to the car, and I'm talking everything, gas, insurance, car payment, all of the stuff that comes with owning a car, no more than 10%. And ideally, like I said, try to pay cash with cars. My 2 cars I owned, the first one I bought for $1,900. It was a 2003 Chevrolet Cavalier, black stick shift manual back in the day. I love that car, honestly. And it was a great car. First car, I was 16 years old. The second car I got was in college in 2013. I bought a 2012 Nissan Altima, and I bought it for about $11,000, and it was all cash paid for. The third car I bought was a Hyundai Sonata 2011, and we bought that for about the same price, about $12,000, and that was in cash as well. Highly recommend you guys to use cash for cars. Cars are depreciating assets on the balance sheet, and it's not worth it to put a bunch of money in a car, especially when you're early on in your career and you're trying to build a lot of wealth. Number 10 is your total lifetime cost of a car. Expect this. Your sticker price that you buy it for times 3 is typically your total lifetime cost, everything that goes into a car. So when you buy a car for $30,000, don't expect to just pay $30,000 with interest on the loan, potentially with gas, with insurance, with maintenance, everything. And for holding it for a lifetime, it's typically about 3x that, and that's on averages. So be very careful. Sometimes people buy beaters. Sometimes people buy things that cost more than 3x, but this is something to expect when you're going into purchasing this. I'm a very conservative individual for good reason, because I like to be below the averages so that when life hits me really hard like it has, I'm able to, course correct. When we lost our house a couple months ago, cost us $300,000 in cash out of pocket within 2 months. Being prepared for that was huge. So if I was not prepared for that, that would have wrecked our family. That would have taken us into potentially a 30-year, another loan on our house, a HELOC, whatever the case is. And that would have put us in a really, really bad position. But because we had millions invested and we actually set ourselves up for success and we did this for a long period of time, when that tough time came, we were able to handle that financially. Although it wasn't fun, it was doable. And although it's not something I encourage you to experience, um, it was doable. And so from a financial perspective, there's still stress that comes with that. You don't want to fork out $300,000 in cash. But when push came to shove and my family's life was on the line, literally, it allowed me to be at peace, to say this is what we built our wealth for, to be able to handle family affairs and make sure we're in a good position. So that's what we did. Number 11, when to replace your car. When maintenance costs more than the car itself. So let's say your, tires blow or your engine blows, and the cost of that costs more than the actual car itself. You might as well just get rid of it. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to continue to sink money in an asset that literally is losing not only value, but pretty much has no value at that point in time. So get a new car at that point in time. It only makes sense. Get rid of what you have. And sometimes you get to sell it to the literal junkyard if it's that bad. Number 12, emergency fund size. Put 3 to 6 months of expenses in this minimum. And don't overshoot it if you want to go above and beyond. If you're on the less risky side, do 3 months. If you're on the more risky side, do 6. So if you have like a family, you have like 1 income versus 2 income type deals, lean towards the higher end of that. But also don't get in the position where you're just saving to save. Figure out what your monthly expenses are, times that by 3, times that by 6, and aim for that. Save that away, be done with it, put it in a high yield savings account, and never touch it unless an emergency actually comes. Don't dip into that fund. Don't oversave to where you're like 12 months or like 2 years worth of cash. Like, cash is losing value. Cash is not a great asset. So do not hold a bunch of cash here. Make sure your family's protected, but do not lose cash or do not lose wealth by saving a bunch of cash. In fact, saving cash is stupid. And if you're saving cash, you're not building wealth. So the number 13 is a 50-30-20 rule when it comes to budgeting. So if you want a basic kind of rule of thumb to figure out where to spend my money, you want to do 30% on spend on wants, 50% of spend on necessities, and 20% of spend on saving/investing. If you do this rule of thumb, you're going to be well off. If you want to speed your wealth journey up, like myself, we did not do 30-50-20. In fact, I think the average individual can aim for this. I think if you want to be above average and do what we've done ourselves, I would aim for as much as you can to invest, to be honest, all while living life and all while understanding the long-term picture here. Number 14 is the 30-day rule. The 30-day rule for expenses over a certain dollar amount, I want you to set that, what that means for you. Wait 30 days to actually purchase that, because that takes away the emotion of spend. Typically when something comes up and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever, I want this right now, emotion takes over and you justify away with emotion. And so your logic goes out the window. If you wait and give it time, logic creeps back in. You start to think about it. Do I really want that? And you make better decisions. So whatever that dollar amount is, whether it's $1,000, whether it's $500, just wait 30 days, but set that rule in motion so you're in a good position. Number 15, how much to spend on food? 10 to 15% of gross income on groceries and dining out. I don't care who you are. I don't care what income you have. I don't care where you live. This is the rule of thumb. Again, if you live in LA, if you live in New York City, I hate to break it to you, but math doesn't lie. And so if you decide to spend more, that's fine, but it's just hurting yourself. So you have to think of creative ways to get within that. And my wife and I, extremely healthy. We are very natural when it comes to our food. We don't do any process. We don't eat out. We do all these very natural ways of eating, which makes us feel great. And we still can stay within this percentage. And I I really, really encourage you to do the same. Number 16. So how much of a windfall to spend? So let's define what a windfall is. You get a bonus, you get a inheritance, you get any type of big check that's kind of unexpected. That's a windfall. So 1 to 5% of that, use it on fun money to kind of get that urge out. Because if you get a bunch of money, the average human being wants to go splurge on something, and use the rest wisely. So maybe that's to pay off debt faster. Maybe that's to invest. Maybe that's to get to your goal faster on your savings, your emergency savings. Maybe that's to help your child go to college debt free. Whatever the goal is, use the rest wisely. Now, all of my students in Budget Dog Academy understand what I'm talking about when I say cash flow goal worksheet. If you do not have this, you need that, because what happens is when you get windfalls, when you get unexpected money, you start to justify based on the emotions that are currently in your brain, the recency bias that you have. So what we do is that we actually lay out our goals entirely, and we say, what is the actual goal that we have, and lay those out in specific order so that we know, here's goal 1, here's goal 2, here's goal 3, here's goal 4, here's how much it takes per month. All these details are already kind of figured out. So if something like this happens, they go straight there and they apply the money there. And it makes your life a lot easier because there's a system in place versus just guessing based on the current day emotion. Number 17 is estimate your annual earnings. So if anybody's ever curious, hey, I make $14 an hour. Here's how to understand how much you make on an annual basis. Take your wage, multiply that by 2, and then add 3 zeros. So for example, if you're making $15 an hour, multiply that by 2, that's $30 plus 3 zeros equals about $30,000 a year. That's a quick rule of thumb. You can be at a party and you can sound really smart by doing that. But these are the 17 rules of thumb when it comes to budgeting. If you master these 17 rules of thumb, you're going to be in a really good spot. If you want me to drop my investing rules of thumb, not just budgeting rules of thumb, I can do so next week in detail, but I need you to tell me that you want that. So either send me a personal message or comment on this post below and say, let's put the keyword investing. Comment the word investing if you really want this, and I can go ahead and take this a step further and go into my 8 investing rules of thumb that will put you in a better position. And again, rules of thumb are the way to start, but it's not the end all be all. And in fact, most of these rules of thumb for us are not followed anymore because they're kind of not even present. Let me go through real fast and explain this. So the 17 rules we went through, like when you first start, these are great. As you build real wealth, these become less relevant. Mortgage payment, we don't have. Home price, we've already bought our home. We're well within that. We don't have a mortgage payment. So neither one of those really matter to us anymore. Obviously, if we upgraded, that would be another thing. But like, I don't have a need to upgrade based on the house that we have. It's beautiful. Plenty. I don't need much. Therefore, we don't need to refinance. Our home maintenance, we absolutely still keep at play. Our rent, we don't do, obviously we don't rent. So 4 of the first 5 don't even apply to us anymore. We have 0 debt. So 6 doesn't apply to us, paid off or invest. We just invest everything. 7 doesn't apply to us because we don't have debt. 8 doesn't apply to us because we paid off our student loans. 9 about the cash or 24/10 rule does not apply to us for cars because we bought it in cash and we don't have any upcoming car purchases. Total lifetime of a car, obviously that applies to everybody forever. When to replace your car, it could, but we'd probably replace it well before it became a junker, and we're in a position to do so. So we're not going to be driving around on 3 wheels like I once did in college. I won't tell you that story, but use your imagination. Emergency fund. We don't even use an emergency fund anymore. We have everything in our brokerage account, which has $2 million plus invested alone. So we don't need an emergency because we can get access to capital. 50-30-20 rule. We definitely don't use this because I would say our total spend, which is wants and necessities at this point in time, is probably like 5% of our total income. Most of it's going to investing, to be honest, or emergency stuff, medical stuff primarily. So we just pretty much invest all of our money, give it away, use it on bettering our lives for our daughter with medical purposes. For example, we're going to Iowa. We're going to spend $15,000 every time we go there. And when you're financially free, you can do that. And we've been putting beautiful position to do so. The 30-day rule, we have really, really good discipline. There's nothing that we splurge on that we even put a dollar amount, to be honest, in there. And so for us, it's not really relevant because we both use common sense when it comes to purchases, and we don't ever have a need to purchase something silly. It's always like, is it for Logan's medical care and stuff like that? And that's really it. So we don't really do that. We pretty much buy whatever we need and or want, but it's not much because we're simple people, and I'd rather be giving that away. Food, we definitely spend below 10 to 15%. Like I said, total expenses is probably like 5% of our income. So like, it doesn't really matter at this point in time. When you're financially free, guys, it gets exponentially easier. But when we first started, these things were applicable. But like I said, I'm trying to show you the reality of growth of investing and the reality of financial freedom. Like, I like to show you both sides, like where we started, now where we're at. How much of a windfall? We don't get windfalls. I don't think I've ever had a bonus because, I work for myself at this point in time, and we've never been given an inheritance. We don't expect to. So we've never done it. I guess it would apply if we did, for whatever reason, get that. But it'd be pretty simple. I'd probably just invest most of it anyway, like pretty simple. Again, this comes down to discipline and who you are as a person. And then estimating your annual earnings, that's just like a fact, right? So like, that doesn't really apply to anybody except if you just want to learn. So that gives you an idea of like where we're at, what we're doing right now. And in this stage of the game, these rules of thumb were very relevant in the beginning of the stages of wealth building. But as you go up the ladder, there's different rules that apply. There's a different game that's being played, and you have to pass each stage of wealth to get to the next. And so if you're in this stage of wealth, that's okay. We were too at one point, but we mastered these rules of thumb to get to the next stage, and now we're playing with house money. So when you get to this stage, it gets better, but the rules do change. And realize, if you're further than the fundamentals, you're a millionaire plus net worth, and you have no bad debt type stuff like that, you're in a really good position, and you're building real wealth. Maybe it's time to up your game. Maybe it's time to join the academy. Maybe it's time to invest in real estate syndications. Maybe it's time to invest in Bitcoin. Maybe it's time to invest in other alternative classes like private equity. But when you first start, it's not going to be that stuff. So all my students understand there's a game that's to be played. And so there's a really, really good step-by-step guidance and roadmap that all my students go through, applicable to them. And once they surpass that level 7, they go to level 8, which is a big opening of wealth building vehicles in different ways than the average person builds wealth. Why do you speed up? Why do I build wealth faster than the average individual at this point? Because 1, there's more capital to invest, and 2, I don't have the same rules as the average person anymore because I've graduated past that. And I'm trying to show people the reality of wealth building and the journey that you have to go through to get to where I'm at. I don't just show you where I used to be. I get to show you where I am now and where I'm headed. When I'm hit 100 million, the game is not my emergency fund anymore. The game is, which private equity deals can I get invested in? Which shoulders can I rub to get into the right rooms to be within looking at 10x type of plays? That's where you get to. So hopefully this helps, guys. Hopefully this is a different type of podcast than you're typically used to. And I will see you guys next week when we talk about hopefully investing. Just comment the word invest if you guys want to get that drop down below, and we'll go from there.
You've been listening to Money on My Mind with your host, Brendan Schlagbaum. If you found value in today's discussion, share it with someone who could benefit from it too. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, so you never miss a money mastery tip. Until next time, stay passionate about your financial journey and keep taking bold steps towards your money goals.